She's not calling you mommy because she's confused. She's calling you mommy because you're the only woman who's ever shown her what a mother's love feels like." The words hung in the air between them, transforming what had begun as an awkward workplace confrontation into something neither of them could have anticipated. If you've ever wondered how a single moment can change the trajectory of multiple lives, stay with me, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see more stories that remind us how unexpected connections can heal even the deepest wounds. Mark Winters clutched his coffee mug tightly as he stared at the email that had just arrived in his inbox. Meeting with Ms. Reynolds, 2 p.m., mandatory. His stomach twisted into knots. Catherine Reynolds, the newly appointed CEO of Horizon Technologies, had been making sweeping changes since her arrival 3 months ago, and the rumor mill suggested another round of layoffs was imminent. As a senior software developer who'd been with the company for 8 years, Mark should have felt secure. But as a single father to 5-year-old Emma, security was a luxury he couldn't take for granted. The morning dragged on endlessly. Mark tried to focus on the code in front of him, but his mind kept drifting to worst-case scenarios. What if he lost his job? How would he pay for Emma's therapy sessions? The special school that was finally helping her overcome her selective mutism? The apartment that was walking distance from his elderly mother who helped with childcare? At 1:55 p.m., Mark straightened his tie and made his way to the executive floor. Catherine Reynolds' assistant, a young man with a perpetually worried expression, nodded him toward the imposing double doors. "She's expecting you." Catherine sat behind a massive glass desk, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that accentuated her sharp cheekbones. At 42, she had become something of a legend in the tech industry. Brilliant, ruthless, and famously childless by choice. "A career is my baby," she'd once told a business magazine, a quote that had earned her both admiration and criticism. "Mark, thank you for coming." Her voice was cool and professional as she gestured to the chair across from her. "I wanted to discuss something with you that's been brought to my attention." Mark braced himself for the worst. A performance issue? Budget cuts? Instead, Catherine's next words caught him completely off guard. "Yesterday, I was in the company daycare center for a photo op with the PR team. Your daughter Emma was there." Catherine paused, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against the desk. "When she saw me, she ran up and called me Mommy." Mark felt the blood drain from his face. Emma, who barely spoke to anyone outside their immediate family, who had been in therapy for 2 years following her mother's abandonment, had called the CEO Mommy. I'm so sorry, Ms. Reynolds. Emma's mother left when she was 3. She struggles with—" Catherine held up a hand to stop him. "I'm not upset about being called Mommy, Mark. I'm confused. I've only visited that daycare twice since I started here. Why would your daughter associate me with a maternal figure?" Mark's mind raced. Emma had never mentioned Catherine before. Then it hit him, the company newsletter. Each month it featured a message from the CEO, accompanied by her photograph. For the past 3 months, Mark had been reading those newsletters to Emma at bedtime, partly to help her feel connected to his workplace, partly because Emma seemed fascinated by the lady who runs Daddy's work. "The newsletters," Mark said quietly. "I read them to Emma every night. She keeps your picture by her bed." Catherine's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "My corporate communications? You read those to a 5-year-old as bedtime stories?" Mark felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Emma likes hearing about your ideas for the company. She says you sound like a superhero." For a moment, Catherine just stared at him. Then, to Mark's surprise, a small laugh escaped her. "Well, that's certainly a first. My communications team will be thrilled to know their writing appeals to the kindergarten demographic." The tension in the room eased slightly, but Mark still felt he needed to explain. After her mother left, Emma stopped talking almost entirely. The therapist suggested finding female role models for her, women who are strong and reliable. "When you took over as CEO, your picture was everywhere, and Emma was curious. I started telling her about you, how smart you are, how you worked your way up, how you make important decisions." She connected with that somehow. Catherine's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And that's why she called me Mommy?" Because of some bedtime stories about quarterly projections and market expansion? Mark shook his head, suddenly finding courage he didn't know he had. She's not calling you mommy because she's confused. She's calling you mommy because you're the only woman who's ever shown her what a mother's love feels like. The words hung between them, unexpected and raw. Mark himself wasn't sure where they had come from, but as soon as he said them, he knew they were true. Through those corporate messages, Catherine had unknowingly provided something Emma desperately needed. The voice of a strong, consistent woman who cared about creating a better future. Catherine sat back in her chair, visibly stunned. For the first time since their meeting began, her carefully composed CEO mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. I don't know what to say to that. I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable, Mark said quickly. I can explain to Emma that— No, Catherine interrupted, don't do that. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. I lost my mother when I was 6. My father worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I grew up idolizing women in business magazines because they seemed so powerful, so in control of their destinies. I used to cut out their pictures and keep them in a shoebox under my bed. Mark watched as Catherine Reynolds, the Ice Queen CEO, the woman rumored to fire executives without blinking an eye, revealed a piece of herself that few had likely ever seen. Your daughter, Catherine, continued. She's in the company daycare program? Mark nodded. The subsidized childcare is one of the main reasons I've stayed with Horizon all these years. Emma needs stability, and the staff there has been amazing with her special needs. Catherine stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city's skyline. The board has been pressuring me to cut the daycare program. It's expensive, and they argue it doesn't directly contribute to our bottom line. Mark felt his heart sink. So this was it. Not just his job on the line, but the childcare Emma depended on. I've been resisting, Catherine continued, but I needed more concrete evidence of its value to the company. She turned back to face him. I think I just found it. The meeting took an unexpected turn. Instead of discussing termination, Catherine spent the next hour asking Mark about Emma, about the challenges of single parenthood, about the daycare program and how it could be improved. Mark found himself opening up about the daily struggles. The mornings when Emma refused to speak, the nights when she cried for a mother who had chosen drugs over her own daughter, the small victories when she trusted someone new. I'd like to meet her properly, Catherine said as their conversation wound down. Not as the CEO, just as Catherine. 2 days later, Catherine joined Mark and Emma for lunch in the company cafeteria. Mark had prepared Emma, explaining that the lady from the pictures wanted to meet her. He wasn't sure what to expect. Emma was unpredictable around new people, sometimes hiding behind him, sometimes refusing to acknowledge them at all. But when Catherine approached their table, Emma looked up from her sandwich and smiled shyly. Hello, she whispered, so quietly that Catherine had to lean in to hear her. Hello, Emma, Catherine replied, her usual commanding tone softened. Your dad tells me you like my pictures. Emma nodded, reaching into her small backpack to pull out a folded company newsletter with Catherine's photo. The page was worn at the edges, clearly handled often. You help people build things, Emma said, her voice gaining a little strength. Catherine sat down beside her, seemingly touched by the child's simple understanding of her role. That's right. I help people build things that make the world better. Like Daddy's computer programs? Exactly like that. As Mark watched them interact, he saw something he hadn't expected. Catherine Reynolds was good with his daughter. Not in a practiced professional way, but in an authentic manner that respected Emma's quietness without treating her as fragile. By the end of lunch, Emma had shown Catherine her favorite stuffed animal, smuggled into the daycare against regulations, and had even laughed at Catherine's surprisingly silly impression of a grumpy board member. That lunch became a weekly tradition. Every Thursday, Catherine would clear her schedule for 45 minutes to eat with Emma and Mark. The company rumor mill went into overdrive. Was the CEO dating a staff developer? Was this some new management technique? But Catherine seemed indifferent to the gossip, focused instead on her growing bond with the quiet little girl who had somehow pierced her professional armor. 3 months into their Thursday lunches, disaster struck. Emma's grandmother, Mark's mother, suffered a severe stroke. With her in the hospital and requiring extensive rehabilitation afterward, Mark's childcare safety net vanished. The company daycare only operated during business hours, leaving Mark with an impossible situation for early mornings, evenings, and the frequent late nights that software development often required. Mark was in the hospital waiting room frantically calling babysitting services when Catherine appeared, having heard the news through the company grapevine. Without hesitation, she sat down beside him and took out her tablet. "Give me your schedule for the next 2 weeks," she said, her CEO efficiency kicking in. "We'll create a coverage plan. Catherine, I appreciate it, but Mark, let me help, please." Over the next few weeks, Catherine became a regular presence in Mark and Emma's life outside of work. She rearranged board meetings to pick Emma up from daycare when Mark needed to work late. She learned Emma's bedtime routine and which stories the little girl preferred on weekends when Mark visited his mother in rehab. Catherine would take Emma to museums or parks, sending him photos of his daughter gradually coming out of her shell, speaking more, laughing more. One evening, after putting Emma to bed in her apartment, an arrangement that had become increasingly common, Catherine found Mark staring at a photograph of Emma as a baby, being held by a young woman with Emma's same dark curls. "Her mother?" Catherine asked softly, sitting beside him on the couch. Mark nodded. "Melissa. We were so young when Emma was born, 23, both still finishing college. I thought we were in love, but looking back we were just clinging to each other out of fear and excitement and obligation." He sighed, tracing the edge of the frame. "The drugs started after Emma's first birthday. Prescription painkillers at first, then whatever she could get. I tried everything, rehab, therapy, ultimatums, begging. Nothing worked." Catherine listened silently as Mark described the day he came home to find 2-year-old Emma alone in her crib, hungry and crying, while Melissa was passed out on the bathroom floor. How he'd finally gotten full custody. How Melissa had shown up sporadically for visits, each time promising to get clean, each time disappearing again until the final time, when Emma was 3, when she'd promised to come for Emma's birthday but never arrived. They later learned she'd overdosed in a motel room 2 states away. "Emma stopped talking after that," Mark said. "The therapists call it selective mutism triggered by trauma. She'd speak to me, sometimes to my mother, but no one else. Not until you." Catherine's hand found his in the dim light of the living room. "Mark, I need to tell you something." Her voice had none of its boardroom authority now. "I never wanted children. I convinced myself it was because I was too focused on my career, too selfish to be a good mother. But the truth is, I was terrified of failing them the way my father failed me after my mother died. He did his best, but he was so broken by her loss that he could never really see me." She squeezed his hand. "These past months with Emma, with you, they've changed something in me. I find myself checking the time during meetings, eager for our lunches. I wake up thinking about what book I'll read to her next. I worry about her when I'm traveling for business." Catherine looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think I love her, Mark, and that terrifies me." That night marked a turning point. Catherine began to integrate herself more fully into their lives, not just as emergency childcare, but as someone who wanted to be there. She attended Emma's therapy sessions to learn how to better support her speech development. She converted one of her guest rooms into a space just for Emma, decorated with stars and planets because Emma had mentioned liking the night sky. 6 months after that first awkward meeting in Catherine's office, Mark received another unexpected email, meeting with Ms. Reynolds, 2 p.m., mandatory. His heart raced, but for entirely different reasons than before. This time when he entered her office, Catherine wasn't behind her desk. She was standing by the window, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Is everything okay?" Mark asked. "The board approved my proposal this morning," she said. "We're not just keeping the daycare program, we're expanding it. Extended hours, weekend options, support for children with special needs, emergency care for family situations, like what you went through with your mother." Mark felt a wave of relief. "Catherine, that's wonderful. So many families will benefit." "There's more," she continued, moving closer to him. I've been offered a position as CEO of a larger tech firm in Boston. Triple the salary, more prestige, a chance to really make my mark on the industry. Mark felt his stomach drop. Boston was across the country. Emma had just started to flourish with Catherine in her life. How would he tell his daughter that another mother figure was leaving? I turned it down, Catherine said, watching his face carefully. What? Why would you do that? It's an amazing opportunity. Catherine took a deep breath. Because my life is here now, with Emma, with you. She reached for his hand. Mark, I've spent my entire adult life climbing the corporate ladder, convinced that success and power were all I needed to be fulfilled. Then a little girl called me mommy, and suddenly all those corner offices and executive titles seemed hollow compared to the way she looks at me when I read her a bedtime story. Mark felt his heart pounding. What are you saying, Catherine? I'm saying I want to be in your lives, not as emergency childcare or a lunch buddy or a bedtime story reader. I want to be a family. I want to help raise Emma. I want to be there for all of it. The hard days, the good days, the ordinary days. Mark was stunned. Are you proposing? Catherine laughed, some of her usual confidence returning. I'm proposing we figure this out together. Maybe we start by acknowledging that what we feel for each other is more than friendship. Maybe we see where that takes us. 1 year later, Mark stood in the back of a small garden, watching as Emma, now 7, walked carefully down a petal-strewn aisle, carrying a small basket of flowers. Behind her, Catherine appeared in a simple ivory dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, instead of in its usual severe bun. As she reached him, Emma took both their hands in hers. Are we a forever family now? Emma asked, her voice clear and strong, no trace of the selective mutism that had once silenced her. Catherine knelt down to Emma's level, something the old Catherine Reynolds would never have done in public. We've been a family for a long time, sweetheart. Today just makes it official. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and celebrated, Catherine's former assistant approached them. I never thought I'd see the day, he said, shaking his head in amazement. The CEO who once said a career is my baby, becoming a mother and wife. Catherine smiled, watching as Emma showed her new grandmother, Mark's mother, now recovered from her stroke, how to use the photo booth. I didn't replace my career with a family, she corrected him. I expanded my definition of success. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep between them on the hotel suite sofa, exhausted from the day's excitement, Mark turned to his new wife. Do you ever regret it, turning down Boston, the bigger title, the bigger paycheck? Catherine looked down at Emma, gently brushing a curl from the child's forehead. Not for a second. The day Emma called me mommy in that daycare center was the day my priorities shifted, even if I didn't realize it yet. She looked up at Mark, her eyes full of certainty. Some people spend their whole lives chasing success, only to discover they've been running in the wrong direction. I'm just grateful Emma helped me change course before it was too late. As Mark watched his wife and daughter, the family he never expected to have, he thought about how a single moment, a child's innocent mistake, had changed everything. Emma, calling Catherine mommy, had been the catalyst, but it was Catherine's willingness to open her heart, to step outside the identity she'd built for herself, that